right. We are talking with Nick Canfield, who's the director of a really outstanding documentary called The Reverend, which is about a man who is sort of searching for a way to channel his passions, but in a way that's maybe outside the traditional boundaries of that normally contain passions. And so Nick, thank you for being here, and excited to have The Reverend as part of the Realist.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Michael. Happy to be here and definitely excited for The Reverend to be one of the films on the Reelists.
Well, how did you come upon the Reverend, whose name is Vince Anderson? How did you come upon him?
Well, Reverend Vince is kind of an institution in Brooklyn and in the New York music scene. And I was just a fan, I'd been going to see him for a few years, probably 6 or so years before I started making the documentary, which is, even at that point, just a drop in the bucket for him. I mean, he'd already been performing for, 15 years at that point, every week in the city. So one day I was just like, wow, this is a really powerful experience, and I wonder if what's going on behind the curtain is as outrageous as what's going on stage.
So what was happening on stage, and then what did you kind of discover behind the curtain? Was it any different?
Well, Vince is a really, powerful performer. I mean, and this show is a really special combination of, like a great gospel rock show, that gets kind of jam bandy and psychedelic, but it's also a spiritual experience and a community experience for everybody in the room. Vince likes to say that there's not a lot of places in our society or in our lives where we get to sing together with other people. And Vince gets everybody singing, and it's a really fun time while also being in a bar. So it's pretty open to everybody, and it's very casual. So I was like, wow, I wonder if is this just a persona, or is Vince, really a spiritual figure? And it turns out that he's a real reverend, and he does a lot of spiritual and community activism, and it definitely is a calling for him where he tries to help people and provide a service to people, but also interestingly at the same time, it's not really a persona. Like it's not a persona that he's on stage, but at the same time, he's not actually like a crazy extrovert. He's actually kind of an introvert.
Yeah. So I mean, can you talk a little bit about that dichotomy? Because when you just initially see him on stage within the film, he does seem like an incredibly crazy extrovert, sort of, Jack Black with a band behind him.
Yeah, that's sure. That's for sure. I mean, he's on stage. He's raining sweat onto the keyboard, and his hat comes flying off, and he has to change caftans halfway through the show because he sweats through it, and he climbs off the stage and hugs people and all these things, and then when you get off stage, he's a little bit more of like a quieter, mild mannered person. And it's not like it's not like that's a persona. It's a part of who he is. It's sort of it's a space for that part of him to come out. And in a way that it's the whole experience is, I think, as cathartic for him as it is for the audience.
You mentioned that he's a Brooklyn institution. Could you describe the relationship between Brooklyn and Vince in Brooklyn?
Yeah, of course. Vince he's been in New York a long time, but he's actually from California and came to New York through Denver. And then he came to New York to go to seminary, actually, and then dropped out pretty soon after and realized that music was his calling, and started doing this weekly show in a bar. You know what I mean? And over time, over the last 25 years, it's grown to bigger and bigger venues, and it's something on Monday night that is is kind of unusual because you're having this spiritual experience in a bar while also really jamming out to great music. So it's become a real institution in Brooklyn and in New York that people go out to every week.
Do you think there's a reason why it works really well at Union Hall?
I think Union Pool is a great venue because it's pretty small, but not too small. So you can get a good sized crowd in there, but it feels intimate. And it's a long running bar and that people really know, and they have a lot of great music there, but they also have a lot of different parts to it. So we'll have a show like Reverend Vince's, which is free. It's by donation. People can kind of just walk right in. So it works really well.
And so is the crowd that goes there. Do you think there's a reason why it just works there?
It's a good. I mean, it's very central in Williamsburg, and so it's a good spot for that. He has a good mixture of, regulars, people who, even like myself, I still go a lot. People who really, know everybody, a lot of other people in the room, and then tourists who are in New York City for the first time. I mean, for some reason, he's gotten on like a list in like Argentina of like things that you should do for free when you're in New York City. So there'll just be like a ton of Argentinians there one day, or a ton of Germans there one day, and so that's really great because a lot of people who come to the U.S. and aren't familiar with him really and get to experience this Americana music.
And I'm assuming he can cross all language barriers.
Definitely. He definitely crosses all language barriers. Yeah.
You've done a lot of short films, and this is a feature. When you approached it, did you think it might be a short at first? Did it turn into something, or was it always going to be a feature?
When I approached it, I wasn't totally sure. I wanted to kind of let it, have to learn more about what Vince was doing and what was going on behind the scenes. I thought it was possible that it was a short, but once I saw, not only how, the other things that he does in terms of community and political activism that I thought would make it a feature, he also, he says so much on stage, and I think actually, despite the fact there's a lot of music in the film, over time I actually ended up including less music than I thought I would at first. So, but it is a concert film, and in order to have a concert film, you really have to be a feature length.
At what point did you try to approach? Questlove shows up in the film and is a fan clearly of Reverend Vince. At what point did you try and reach out to him and connect with him, and then get him included in the film?
Yeah, I've been filming for probably over a year when I started trying to reach out to Questlove. He used to come a lot and play with Reverend Vince when I was starting to see him before the Roots like really took off. Immediately before they started doing the Tonight Show, and when they obviously had less time. But you would see Questlove a fair amount, and he would just come and sit in and jam on drums with them, which was great. And so I had to reach out through various people to get Questlove to be in the film. And then, once it all kind of finally got going, he was really great and amenable. We actually filmed it at 30 Rock in the Roots green room there, right near the stage. But it took like a year and a half. And he's a very busy guy, and that's how it is with big celebrities. It took a long time to get it all agreed and set up schedule wise.
And what did he talk about in terms of his appreciation for Vince, maybe either as a musician or just as this force?
Yeah, first of all, he has a lot of great things to say about the quality of the band. Vince's band is terrific. They're all amazing musicians who are in other bands and do this just because they love playing together. So it's kind of a sort of indie music supergroup in a way. Members of TV on the radio and things like that. But one of the things I thought Questlove said that was very insightful was that like spirituality doesn't just happen in a church or in a mosque or in any house of worship. It's everywhere. And why not use your gifts where people gather? And that's, I think, what Vince does, and what he learned is that, that any space can be a community space, a spiritual space, a third space that people are all looking for now in their lives.
It sounds like how long did you shoot for, and how long did it take to put this together? And then what are some of the challenges of putting together an independent film like this?
Yeah, I mean, so this was like a real verite observational film. I just followed Vince around as much as I could. I filmed in the shows a lot, so it takes a long time to do that, and you do end up with like hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage. It was about 5 years of me following Vince. It was a good 4 years before I even started editing. Um, and um, and yeah, you learn how the story evolves. You know what I mean? You have to kind of figure out where to go, and that's part of it. It's part of the challenge of it, and part of the joy of it is that I get to experience a lot of things with Vince, and a lot of it isn't in the film. I mean, by far the most expensive shoot was I flew with the band to Dublin and filmed them playing at the Guinness Brewery and playing shows in Ireland and all kinds of stuff like that. And none of that is in the film at all. So you never know how it's going to go. And then another challenge that we had was we actually finished editing right when COVID happened. I mean, I flew back with all the hard drives from Austin, where my editor was, back on the day before the lockdown. So then I had to kind of sit, people were not going to movies, film festivals were not happening. So I had to kind of sit on the film for another year and a half. And so I was really pulling my hair out.
Yeah, and that's obviously some of the timing of that is specific to a global pandemic, but there are always these crazy challenges that come up in making a film. We talk about a 5-6 year process. It's why, and you're talking at the end about a distribution challenge, right? Festivals are a key part of how films start to get out to a crowd, and find an audience. Why do you think a place like the Realist or other people who are trying to impact independent film distribution, how do you think the world of that is evolving, and what role could a place like the Realist play?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the film landscape evolves. Like people always say, like, oh, it changes every 18 months, and so it can be challenging if you make a film over the course of 2, 4, 6, 8 years, and then it's finished, and then the environment for what people want to see, or what the sort of players in the media landscape are, has changed so much, and it can be difficult for filmmakers to navigate that. And we've also seen a lot of conglomeration, monopolization, in the industry. There's a handful of streamers where people get spend a lot of their time and content, and people are also spending a lot of their time watching, just vertical social media videos and stuff like that. And in a way, it's while that's not the same business or the same industry, it's still a sort of a competition for people's viewing time, and so and that has caused a lot of people to make films that have to sort of appeal to that in some way, or work around that. So it can be now a lot harder, where there's a lot of great film festivals, people can go and see independent films, and then after that it can be a lot harder for people to see those films, because if your film isn't on Netflix, which is hard, very hard, then people can't be as exposed to it. So there are now, I think people are realizing that they don't want their media diet to just be for streamers, and there's a lot of great smaller new independent streamers and other outlets that are gaining more traction and more popularity, like The Realist. And I think that's really important, that people can have a place where they can go and watch independent films that are really amazing, but just can't fit into this funnel of only a couple of streamers. So now, a platform like The Realist is a place where people can go and find these films that might be otherwise difficult to find.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have the Realist have the Reverend, because it's sort of just a perfect distillation of what we're trying to do. Vince is an incredible character. It's a beautifully made film, and then one that just flew under the radar, because it's not Vince isn't this A-list celebrity that a major streamer would want in order to be very promotable, and yet it's as good a film as you're ever going to find. So it's perfect for us, and so happy that it's on the platform. The one scene that I did want to ask you about, it's actually a much quieter scene than Vince in the bar. It's the scene where he's cutting his grass and using a non-motorized grass cutter, and just I wondered what that scene was like to film, and why it wound up being important for you to have it in there.
It's funny. That was the first thing I ever filmed with Vince. Actually, you never know how those things will go. Yeah, the first thing I shot, and that was a reason for that, because I wanted him to be able to just be natural and be at home and see him kind of in another space where you don't see him, and give him a chance to, get comfortable with me and not be in a performing kind of environment, and yeah, and I think that shows. He is just kind of doing his routine, but he's enjoying talking to me about it, and it's nice to see those quiet moments of him, and those little kind of personal joys and challenges that everybody has. I mean, he's a public figure, but what's interesting about that is it's super universal private stuff. I mean, he's talking about his childhood, and things weren't always so great with his parents in the house, and how that gardening helped him with that, and how there he is in the garden now, and he still has those joys and those memories, and just people putzing around in their garden, and is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. So it's nice to have those moments where we're out of the bar and the show, because we're in there so much, seeing all that, and this way we kind of break that up a little bit, and you see some other sides of Vince.
Yeah, it was an awesome pace change, and also just super insightful. Were there particular moments that you remember that maybe you weren't even rolling on, that were just kind of blew your mind, or a little sort of? I know in the films that I've made, there's almost always one that's like, wow, I didn't get it, or it was just something that it didn't fit the final film, but it was a great moment.
Oof, let me think. I mean, there's a few things like that. I mean, he says a lot of funky stuff on stage that we couldn't get, various other stuff in the question time. We had to cut out a lot of people ask me, like, oh, how come you don't hear from the audience or the crowd, in the film? And that was something that we filmed, but they are, it became, first of all, it's an audio challenge. It's very loud, and so it just sounds very different, and it kind of, part of that takes you kind of out of the experience of kind of feeling like you're on the stage or you're seeing the stage. But also, people were very drunk. And so they said a lot of ridiculous things. And even when they're saying very insightful things, there's someone next to them looking wasted. And so we decided not to include that. I had to cut out a part which I would like to maybe put back in one day, about Vince. Part of the sequence where we have Vince's coming back to his spiritual calling, and starting to work with people in a spiritual sense again after he starts performing, is that they how September 11th affected that a lot for him. The band was performing out of the city during September 11th, and then when he came back, they came in by plane and saw everything that had happened, and there were a lot of people who had lost people who were coming to his shows and bringing photos and mementos of the people that they had lost, and that he was able to help them in a little bit of a way, and that was powerful for him as well. That kind of showed him that was a calling. So we show that in the film anyway, but we did take out the 9/11 stuff. So I thought that was interesting, and then on the other side, I saw that he doesn't always want to go on stage. Sometimes he's exhausted too, and he doesn't feel like going on. And then every time when he goes on, he comes around. You know what I mean? He's glad that he's there. But I have seen him show up to do a show like really with a really bad flu, and like go on stage and then throw up backstage like between sets, which I filmed. And then I was like, I don't think Vince really wants me to put him throwing up in there in the film. So there were a lot of fun moments with him that we couldn't
Well,
get to
I
fit.
can't wait for people to experience it. Thank you for being a part of this, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Looking forward to it, and can't wait for everyone to see the film.